Another really useful teaching, pointing that I heard, I think, from Craig Holiday. On some level, it's like there are no original teachings, and where did he get it from? And yeah, it's good not to get too proprietary about knowledge, about wisdom. If it's true, it's sort of universally true, but you also want to acknowledge sometimes where you've gotten information from and teachings from. But it's this idea that every form casts a shadow. And that is just, that's a very general statement in one level, but beautifully general because you can apply it to so many things. But especially when we're thinking about, it's one of these teachings that works on so many levels, but especially when we're thinking about psychodynamically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. Well, yeah, you can even step back just kind of very fundamental level. God, the eternal effulgence, the eternal radiance. Light unending, without division, without limit, without boundary, without limit. Just emanation, pure radiance, just like the sun. Out of that wholeness, and I'm thinking Rupert Spira, how does he say it? Multiplicity and diversity of forms. So out of that wholeness, eternity, infinity, arises, all the myriad forms of existence. But to take on a boundary, to take on a limit, to take on some level of form, you can see how that, taking on a form implies a certain kind of limitation, implies a certain, even if you're just thinking about it physically, every form on earth, you've got the sun shining down, and when it hits a form, it's going to cast a shadow. It implies a certain opacity. Taking on a form is like taking on a certain density, a certain kind of opacity to the light. And so, just naturally, just inherent in that process, it implies a certain shadow, a certain, I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to say, it's like blockage is almost too strong of a word, but I guess opacity to the light, certain diminishment of the fullness of the light. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can see it just at that kind of basic level. Just at that basic level, every form casts a shadow. But I think it's useful also with teachings, with listening to somebody talk about reality, about healing, about transcendent reality, God, being, wholeness. It's like every teaching, when or every share, every teaching, every pointer, whatever word. Speech itself is a kind of form, obviously. It's like you're taking the infinite sea of possibilities and you're putting it into these utterances, into these verbalizations, to these concepts. That's all a certain kind of formalization, a certain kind of bracketing or boundarying or limiting. Yeah, it's just speech itself is a form, and so it's like every teaching is partial, is another way to say it, is incomplete necessarily. And it arises in response to, you could say, duality. It arises in response to some misalignment, potential misalignment, some deviation from the highest, and comes as sort of a corrective. Every teaching, every pointer, ideally, it comes as some kind of a reorientation or a counterbalancing force. In the Great Perfection, it just doesn't arise. There's no need, you could say, for a teaching, for it's just self-sufficient, self-satisfied, self-luminous. Yeah, the moment you put it into language, you start to put some parameters around it. So you could just say, God is the complete sentence, is, period. Just, And that's the great harmony, that's the great peace, that's the great wholeness. But in this world of forms, it's like you can fall off the path. Again, here's another Ram Dass-ism, and who knows where he got it from, right? But he talks about this man goes to sits with a Zen teacher, and he's sitting there watching him interact, watching the Zen teacher interact with students, and one student comes in and he tells him, okay, he guides him with very clear instructions about going this direction. Another student comes in and he gives him the exact opposite advice. Another one comes in and it's something completely different. And eventually the person observing all of this, asks the Zen teacher about, asks him, great teacher, I notice that you give very different answers. If the truth is one and undivided, how is it that you're giving such different answers to each person that comes in? It seems very contradictory. You seem to contradict yourself with each new teaching, each new student. Ram Dass explained this much better, obviously, but the teacher says, well, if you're going down the path and you're falling off into the ditch in one direction, the help that you need is a push to the right. If you're going down the path and you start falling off into the ditch on the other side of the road, you need a push from the left. I feel like that wasn't very well explained, and so teachings are like that. It's like they're always partial, and it's always in response to a deviation or an imbalance in one direction. And so that's why two people can hear the same teaching and it can really resonate for one, because it's addressing a way that they are struggling, that they are out of balance, and it's helping to kind of harmonize that, to integrate, to come back into alignment. And for the other person, it may even be harmful. It may be totally useless, it may be meaningless, it may even be harmful. And so again, it's that idea that every form casts a shadow. So every teaching is a kind of form. And so you just, on some level, you have to be discerning about, is this useful for me right now? Is this the thing that's going to help me right now? You can't really speak the truth on an ultimate level, the absolute level, because speech is already downstream. It's already an apparition within the absolute, right? So, but within the relative level, where we're working out our stuff, samskaras, is that the word? Karma, psychological wounds, however you want to think about it, our stuff. You know, that's where these teachings can be really helpful. It's where having guidance can be really helpful. And ultimately, again, another metaphor, it's like you use a stick to stir the fire, to keep the fire going, but ultimately you toss the stick into the fire. It's like ultimately all methods, all teachings should have a self-destruct button. Or, yeah, is this a Buddhist image? The idea of using a raft, using a teaching to get across the stream. Once you're across, you no longer need the raft, right? You've arrived. Take what you need and leave the rest. I don't know who wrote that. Is it Robbie Robertson? Somebody from the band. I think, unless Bob Dylan wrote that for them. I think that the band wrote that song. The night they drove old Dixie down. Take what you need and you leave the rest. It's sort of like that. So that's another level that saying can be really helpful. Every form casts a shadow. Teachings are like that. Teachings are a certain form. And you don't even need, in this case, shadow. Yeah, that seems almost too strong of a way to state that. But it's just a recognition that, you know, not every teaching is applicable in every situation. Now, of course, we in our humanity carry a lot of shadow material, individual, collective. At some level, it doesn't really matter whose it is. It's just within our consciousness, within our being. And do you ever become completely free of that shadow? I don't know. I think you transmute, you transform, you thaw out some of the density of all that frozen material. and it releases over time. So you become more transparent, more light shines through. But it seems like as long as you have some kind of a form, there's going to be some, here's Craig Holiday coming through, some growing edge. I don't know, I'm thinking about like Tibetan lamas that are said to attain the rainbow body, in which you become so transparent, so diaphanous, so aligned with the light of grace. It's almost like the apparent physical world, physical matter itself, but the density of apparent physicality could say dematerializes. That's probably the best word, dematerializes. You become radiant light. I mean, you all there is really is just different densities of light. Anyways, so, and there's a humility just in that recognition. Every form casts a shadow. So I think what we're doing is lessening the depth of that shadow. But yeah, even at the governmental, societal, civilizational level, you can have a very enlightened form of government. You know, a value like free speech, how powerful that is. That there's this openness to allowing whatever needs to be spoken to come out. You can see all the dangers of inhibitions, prohibitions on speech, and how quickly that can just toxify a society, a consciousness, an individual, you know, at every level. Having those sorts of prohibitions against speech and freedom of thought, you can see how wise and how healthy that is, and how that is that's coming from a much higher level, you could say, that kind of a value. But even there, with free speech, there's obvious, you know, it's not a perfect vehicle. I think it's moving in the direction of perfection, moving in the direction of wholeness, but that there are shadow sides to free speech, costs to free speech. Yeah, so even the most enlightened government values, social values, there's going to be some trade-offs, some costs. Just had an idea for another video. I think I'm going to pause it and try in another video. But let me see if there's anything else I want to say about this idea. Yeah, it's almost like we use the forms to get free of the forms. Well, no, I don't know if I want to say that. I mean, there's a truth to that with teachings. It's like you use a method, you use a teaching to go beyond it. And you ultimately try to that's why I think a lot of people use the word pointings. These are pointers, because it's like the finger pointing at the moon, right? It's not about the finger, it's about what the finger is pointing to, the light that it's pointing to. And so you use language, you use words to reference, to point to what is beyond language. or to negate, the path of negation, the path of neti. Point out what reality is not, what truth is not, what beingness is not. You can sort of take away till what you're left with is radiance, formlessness. Anyways.